Hey everyone, it's Brooke, and I'm here to do that classic end of the year video, my favorite books of 2015. Some of these books were published in 2015, some weren't. It was a very hard, stressful list to make. I read about 135 books this year. There are 14 books on this list. That's a 10%, which is really hard to pick your top 10%. I just feel like I had such a very great reading year, and it really sort of felt like a defining reading year in my life. So it was fantastic, and it was very hard to make this list. So there are a bunch of books that aren't included, and I feel so bad for them. There are so many books I could go and pull off my shelf to add to this list, the books that I really did love reading, but there's something very particular about the books I chose, about the reading experience, about the ways that they've stuck with me that are very personal to me. And so this list isn't necessarily something I would say, oh, here's all the books I recommend, everyone go read, because it's almost like they live inside of me, and I don't necessarily think that they would live inside everyone else the same way. I mean, there are books on this list I absolutely would not recommend to other people. But for me, this was it. And they're not going to be in any particular order. However, I do have a very favorite of the year, and it was very easy to pick, which is sort of surprising. Narrowing it down to 14 books, hard. Picking one favorite, easy. That seems very wrong, but that's how it went. So let's just dive in. The first to make the list is Helen Phillips's The Beautiful Bureaucrat. It's so tiny. It's one of those books where I actually visualized it in my head, like the imagery, the way she sets a scene, the creepiness, all of it was very cinematic to me. I think I mentioned it when I first talked about it in either a review or wrap-up, saying that I could see this being some kind of really visually stunning art house film, and I still totally stand by this. It stayed, I mean, like, scenes are still burned in my head, and she has a short story collection, I think, coming out this year, and I cannot wait. And then a little book called Hick by Andrea Portes. I came to this through the movie. This is the movie cover. I couldn't find another cover, so it's not a beautiful book on the outside, but it is so amazing on the inside. And this stayed with me because of the voice and the writing and the language. It's Lulu, our main character. She's this quirky, precocious 13-year-old who is a little bit, beyond her years, but at the same time, you see her actually faltering the way a 13-year-old girl would in an adult world. And just the way she speaks, it's a first-person narration, so if you don't like her voice, you're not going to like the book. But I loved the way she kind of, the imagery in this is amazing. The way she sees things through her teenage eyes. It's one of those books that, like, if I was a writer, I'd want to have written this. And I actually sort of wrote like quasi fan fiction about this, just trying to kind of see if I could do something like this. And it was an interesting writing exercise for me. But anyway, really, really loved it. Have never heard anyone else talk about it. So I'm glad that I stumbled upon this and read it, but all the trigger warnings. And then a book I read earlier in the year is Coulson Whitehead's Zone 1. This is very much kind of a cerebral literary fiction zombie apocalypse genre mashup kind of thing. Coulson Whitehead's a very clever, smart man, and he writes in a way that a lot of people don't like, because he gets very kind of flowery and literary, and it's very slow. It's not necessarily plot driven so much as it's just like thoughts about humanity through kind of this zombie apocalypse. And that experience stayed with me so much. I love sort of post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic, dystopian-esque worlds where it's very, very slow to unfold, and you don't necessarily know where it's going, but the language is beautiful, and you're learning so much about society and culture. It's a great satire, but it's not for everyone. And so I know that I see lots of people who hate it. I adored it, and I cannot wait to read more Coulson Whitehead. The Only Ones by Carol Dibble might be the most singular reading experience I had this year. I'm not sure I've ever read a book quite like this one. It's, again, another first-person narration, so you have to really like the voice, and this book really is about the voice. It's post-pandemic society trying to bring itself back from decimation, and our main character, who, oh bless me, I've forgotten her name, Inez, is basically, she's immune, so she sells parts of herself, her genetic makeup and whatnot, her eggs and things of that nature, her genetic material, to clone children because it's hard to have children in this world anymore. And she doesn't want the clone baby herself, but she ends up having to take the clone baby, and it's about sort of the creation of human life and the ways in which women can be mothers even when they don't necessarily want to be mothers, and how you can develop into motherhood over time, and even if it's not something very intrinsic to who you are as a person, and that really spoke to me. The voice, though, it's just her language, Inez is not super educated because that's just not the way the world is anymore, and I love that Carol Dibble could make her not have a great or grammatically correct vocabulary, but you still knew she was a really smart person. I think that's a hard balance to strike, and she did it so well. And it's definitely not for everyone. It's slow, but it's still an alive experience for me. Like, I still remember sitting there and reading this book and turning the pages in the ways I felt, the ways this book made me feel, the way I just never really feel reading books the way I felt reading this one. And this one's been raved about by me, and Mercedes really loved it. A lot of people have really loved this. This is By Light We Knew Our Names by Buyin Valentino. This is her debut short story collection, and it is just the only short story collection on this list, which is kind of surprising. But I think it's so amazing that every time I try to compare another short story collection to it, it didn't work. This one is phenomenal. It has just the right amount of sort of fantastical, magical realism elements, balanced with so much human emotion, and I remember the stories individually. I can still remember them. That pink dolphin is going to live with me forever. Still remember direct quotes. It's a reading experience that's still very much alive in me as a person, and that's really kind of the overall theme of this list. And if I had a list of favorite covers, this would be on it. So, Anne Valente, she has a book coming out this year. This book stressed me out. It's Days of Abandonment by Elena Ferrante, and I know Elena Ferrante had quite a year this year with her Neapolitan trilogy, Quartet, which I do intend to read in 2016. That's one of my reading plans. But this book is where I started with her, and it stressed me out. I was reading this when I was at a work conference in New Orleans, and oh my gosh, I had to put it down. I had to walk away. It's about a woman, it's a very cliche story. She's a middle-aged woman. Her husband has abandoned her for a younger woman, and it's her grieving that process, and man, is it ugly. But, grief is basically momentary insanity, and at least as far as my experiences with it are concerned, people do really awful, horrible, terrible things because you're ripped to shreds. You're not who you were anymore. And this book really, really, really went there and did not hold back. And yet I didn't hate the narrator no matter what awful, terrible things she did. I really understood her. And with books that get really kind of bleak and dark like this, I need some kind of hope in it, even if it's just a faint glimmer. And this had that, and I love the way it ended. And then a book I don't think I've talked about on this channel, and that's St. Maisie by Jamie Attenberg. Not in my wheelhouse at all. I don't even remember why I decided to read this. It's just straight sort of plot-driven historical fiction, and that's just not my thing. It's not. I know a lot of people love it. I've never been able to get into it. But this one, I really enjoy it. It's told in this kind of quasi-documentarian style where you get Maisie's journal. So that's most of it, but there's also these kind of interviews with people who either once knew her or had family members who once knew her, and so it's like a research project almost, and that's kind of what Jamie Attenberg did in real life, is that this is based on a real woman that no one really knows that much about, so she created this life for her. And it's set in the starts around 1920, goes to like the 1930s, 40s. And the main character is why I love this. I loved Maisie. I loved that she was able to be progressive as a woman during her time, but also subvert the idea of being progressive. I don't think that makes sense. But what I'm saying is, like, she didn't need to get married and have kids. You know, she could have this whole life she valued on her own. But at the same time, she didn't run off and leave her family behind and abandon them. She stayed at home, and she was very maternal to the people in her family she needed to take care of. And I just really liked how she didn't have to be this kind of cold, disinterested, run away from home kind of progressive woman. She could be this really full-body, complex lady, and I really, really liked her. It was a quick read. It's very just sit down in an afternoon and enjoy yourself. This is not the first time this lovely lady is going to make the list, but this is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making by Catherine Valente, and I've been hearing about this book for years, but I was just convinced I wouldn't like a middle grade novel, but I was wrong. And what really strikes me about this as a middle grade series is that it does not speak down to its audience. The language is so vibrant and luscious, and I feel like it's way above a middle grade reading level, to be honest. I adored it. I think Catherine Valente has one of the best imaginations and just creative writing abilities. And what's really, really kind of hit home with me is how much this put me back in that mind space of a child reader, where it was just so magical, and I was seeing things the ways I've never seen things before, and I could remember what it was like to be a kid reader again, and that's something that is invaluable to me. I think that's magic. That's the magic of reading. And then a book I just finished, that is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. So good. I am not obsessed, but I get very into novels about grief, and this is about kind of a broken family grieving the loss of a child, which is something that I have experienced with the death of my niece. So it's something I feel such a personal connection to, and I get mad when books don't do it justice, and I absolutely fall in love when they do, and this book did. So open and honest, and Celeste, this is her first novel, and it left me speechless. So I don't even really have words to explain how much this book means to me, just in a personal way and in a personal kind of experience with grief that I've had and my family has had, and recognizing that. And then there's so much more to it, though. I mean, there's the 1970s sexism and racism, and, the fact that I could relate, because it's a white woman married to a Chinese man, and I'm a white woman married to a Taiwanese man. So just being able to sort of see what our marriage would have been like in the 1970s, which was not that long ago. That's when my parents got married. So everything about this was almost like meant for me. My big project book of the year that I loved I'm so glad I took the chance and picked up Les Miserables, which by Victor Hugo. Absolutely stunning book. It was so topical for 2015, especially if you live in America at the moment, with all of our, people's uprisings. I really feel like that's what's happening with our myriad terrible issues we're having now. And that's really what this book is about. And so it was just such a good book to be reading this year. And, books help you get through things and understand things. And Victor Hugo is amazing. I even like all the tangents he went on to and all the little micro histories he did. I loved them. Everything about this, I was just in the right mood, and it will be a reading experience I remember the rest of my life. The only nonfiction to make the list is Sarah Vowell's The Wordy Shipmates. I adore Sarah Vowell. I'm so glad I found her. I love history, but a lot of times with written history, it can be really dry, and it's just not up my alley. This, though, the way she writes nonfiction, the way she is like anecdotal and really dry and sarcastic, and she's very honest, and it's very real, and it's very true and well researched, but it's a pleasure to turn the page. It's like a page turner, if that's even possible for something about the Puritans. But loved it. Intend to read her full backlist. Catherine Invalente's second book on this list is Radiance. This is another novel I wish I could write, but I know that I will never be able to write. The way she is able to take all the mixed mediums she writes in this book and make it work is mind-blowing. And the way that she is able to have so much really grounded emotion next to like some absurd musical number and still make it feel honest and realistic and not batshit bonkers is amazing. It's one of the only books I've ever finished and immediately wanted to start over. It's just, again, her imagination. Her imagination is worth billions of dollars, in my opinion. And I'm just so sad that more people don't read Catherine Valente, because she is, I'm just a fangirl. And then the final one is The Blue Girl, not the final book for my favorite, is The Blue Girl by Lori Foos. Oh, this book, again, sort of like Invalente, she is able to balance magical realism and like realism so well. And I loved the structure of this, the way it alternates between mother-daughter, 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 the way it talks about families and women and communication and just all of these really great topics in such a short space, but so well. You expect a lot of books that get really deep into some heavy topics to be kind of slower and really long and just really dense prose. And she does this in such a lighthearted way. Despite the fact that it's lighthearted, it hits hard. And finally, my very favorite book of 2015, the book I would have wanted to have written myself over all of these. The book I think is so perfectly plotted and paced, the great slow burn reveal, throwing you in the middle, so little exposition, show and don't tell, just magnificent in all of the ways. And that is Michel Faber's Under the Skin, and this is his first book. And I did read The Book of Strange New Things this year, which I really liked parts of, but had problems with other parts of. And so when I read this, I kind of went in a little bit lowered expectations, and it just blew me away. It is the definition of, to me, a perfectly written book. And I don't know what else I can say about it than that. Go in knowing nothing. All right, that's me done. Yay, ready for 2016 and hopefully another brilliant reading year. Bye, guys.